Teacher living in her car was summoned to the palace without knowing why. Welcome back and enjoy the story. The car smelled of old books, wet shoes, and loneliness. Ursula Matthews pulled her threadbare cardigan tighter around her shoulders. As the October wind rattled the windows of her 1988 Oldsmobile Cutlass, the parking lot behind the abandoned Kmart had become her sanctuary these past 8 months, far enough from the main road to avoid police attention, close enough to the 24-hour laundromat for bathroom access. She'd gotten good at this precarious existence, this balancing act between dignity and desperation. The digital clock on her dashboard flickered, 5:17 a.m. She reached for the thermos of cold coffee she'd prepared yesterday at the gas station and took a small sip, savoring it. Resources were precious now. "Good morning, Edward," she whispered, touching the silver-framed photograph of her late husband propped against the passenger seat headrest. His kind eyes smiled back at her, frozen in time from their 20th anniversary dinner, 3 years before the cancer took him. 3 years before the medical bills swallowed their savings, their house, their future. But not her calling. Ursula opened her lesson planner, its pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. Today's lesson for her 5th graders, early American explorers. She wondered if they would appreciate the irony. She, too, was exploring an America she never thought she'd see. The America of food pantries and social service wait lists, of sleeping in parking lots and showering at the YMCA twice a week with the monthly pass a church had helped her purchase. At 48, she had become invisible. Just another casualty of circumstances too complex for simple solutions, too proud to beg from friends, too stubborn to leave the only profession she'd ever loved. The light from her flashlight wavered as she made notes on the Columbus Day worksheet. She would need to supplement the textbook's sanitized version with gentler truths about indigenous peoples. Her students deserved honesty, but delivered with care. She traced a finger along the class roster. 27 faces she'd memorized in just 6 weeks. Miguel with his brilliant mathematical mind. Tasha, who wrote poems that made Ursula want to cry. Devon, who'd been sleeping through class until she discovered he worked nights helping his grandmother. Clean office buildings. For them, she would press her one professional outfit each evening. For them, she would arrive at Westbridge Elementary with a smile, pretending she'd just come from a cozy apartment rather than a backseat bedroom. Her stomach growled, a sharp reminder that yesterday's dinner, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, was long gone. She reached into her glove compartment and unwrapped half a protein bar, promising herself the other half for lunch. Teachers were masters of delayed gratification. As the sun began painting the eastern sky with whispers of pink and orange, Ursula gathered her dignity around her like armor. She brushed her graying auburn hair, applied a touch of mascara using the rearview mirror, and straightened her collar. Only the closest observer would notice the nearly invisible stitches where she'd repaired the seam, or the way she'd dyed the white collar with tea to mask its fraying edges. "You are still a teacher," she reminded her reflection in the mirror. "Even if they don't see you, even if they don't know." Chapter 2. Principal Walton's office smelled of artificial pine and ambition. The cherry desk gleamed under carefully positioned recessed lighting, and framed certificates pronounced, "His administrative excellence to all visitors." He didn't invite Ursula to sit. "Mrs. Matthews, this is becoming problematic." His fingers formed a steeple under his chin as he surveyed her from behind his spotless desk. "I've received complaints." "About my teaching?" Ursula asked, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. She mentally reviewed her lesson plans, her student interactions, her test scores, all exemplary despite her circumstances. Her 5th graders were showing improvement across all metrics. "About your—" He paused, searching for the most antiseptic word. "Presentation. Your clothing rotation is noticeable. There's been mention of, how do I put this delicately, hygiene concerns." Heat climbed Ursula's neck, settling into her cheeks. The YMCA had been closed for plumbing repairs this week. She'd been making do with the sink at the gas station bathroom, but apparently it wasn't enough. "I apologize," she said, the words ash in her mouth. "I've been having some issues with my water heater. It's being repaired tomorrow." Principal Walton nodded. his expression suggesting he didn't believe her but also didn't care enough to investigate. Several parents have commented, "You understand our image is important. Westbridge Elementary has standards, Mrs. Matthews." Standards that apparently didn't include compassion, Ursula thought but didn't say. "Additionally," he continued, sliding a paper across his desk, "your request for classroom supplies has been denied. The budget simply won't accommodate specialized materials for your reading intervention program." Ursula stared at the rejection form. The specialized materials were simply 20 copies of a children's novel she'd wanted to use with her struggling readers, a $180 request. Last month, the school had spent $12,000 on a new electronic marquee sign. "I understand," she said, though she didn't. Not really. "One more thing." Principal Walton's tone shifted, becoming almost apologetic, which alarmed her more than his. "Criticism. The board is implementing staff reductions. Since you're our most recent hire in the 5th grade team, I'm afraid your position will be eliminated at the semester break." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "But my students will be redistributed among the remaining classes. It's unfortunate timing, but enrollment numbers don't justify our current staffing levels." She wanted to argue that 27 students per class was already too many, that adding her students to other classrooms would push those numbers into the 30s. She wanted to point out that her specialized training in literacy intervention wasn't replicated among the other 5th grade teachers. She wanted to remind him that mid-year transitions were especially hard on children from unstable homes. Instead, she nodded. "I see. You'll finish out the semester, of course, through December." He was already turning his attention to his computer screen, dismissing her. "That gives you nearly 2 months to make arrangements." Arrangements. As if she had options lined up waiting. As if there were other schools hiring mid-year in this economically depressed district. "Thank you for the notice," she managed, clutching her dignity around her like the cardigan that wasn't quite warm enough against the office's aggressive air conditioning. That night, huddled in her car as rain drummed against the roof, Ursula allowed herself to cry, really cry, for the first time since Edward's funeral. Silent, heaving sobs that steamed the windows and left her gasping. "Why, God, why let me love them this much if I'm not enough for them? Why keep me here if I have to beg the world just to exist?" No answer came except the continued patter of rain and the occasional sweep of headlights from passing cars, none of which stopped, none of which saw her. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. Chapter 3. Weeks passed in a blur of lesson plans, quiet hunger, and increasingly cold nights. Ursula settled into a routine of survival, washing her clothes at the laundromat every Sunday, charging her phone at the library, sleeping in a different parking lot each night to avoid attention. She discovered that the hospital parking garage was warmest, though security sometimes made rounds. The church lot was safest on weekends when the building was empty. The Walmart was best for early morning bathroom access. November brought frost to the windows and new challenges. The Oldsmobile's heater worked sporadically, and Ursula had taken to sleeping in layers. 2 pairs of socks, thermal underwear beneath her nightgown, a hat pulled over her ears, and every blanket she owned piled atop her reclined seat. Still, the cold seeped in through metal and glass, settling into her bones. Her students noticed the change in her, the increasing weariness, the occasional lapse in concentration. She'd always been the teacher who remembered every birthday, who noticed new shoes or haircuts, who could tell when a child hadn't had breakfast. Now she sometimes caught herself staring out the classroom window, momentarily lost in her own hunger or fatigue. "Mrs. Matthews?" A small voice pulled her back to the present one Tuesday morning. "Are you sad?" Jaden Wilson stood beside her desk, his dark eyes serious beneath unruly curls. At 10 years old, he'd already developed the keen perception that comes from growing up too quickly. His mother worked double shifts at the hospital. His father had been deployed overseas for most of the past year. "Just thinking, sweetheart," she answered, summoning a smile. "How can I help you?" "I brought you something." He placed a slightly squashed paper bag on her desk, My mom made extra last night." Inside, Ursula found a still warm corn muffin and a boiled egg. Her stomach clenched painfully at the sight. When had she last eaten a warm breakfast? "That's very thoughtful, but I couldn't." "Mom said to make sure you took it." His expression was earnest. "She says teachers forget to eat sometimes because they're busy taking care of everyone else." The kindness nearly undid her. She accepted the gift with as much grace as she could muster, thanking him properly while blinking back tears. After he returned to his seat, she broke off a small piece of the muffin and ate it slowly, making it last. That afternoon, Gloria, Washington, the school custodian, paused while emptying the classroom trash cans. "You're here mighty early every morning and mighty late every evening," she observed, her eyes kind but searching. "Everything all right with you?" Ursula straightened, the already neat papers on her desk. "Just dedicated to the job." Gloria nodded slowly. "My car broke down last year, spent 3 weeks sleeping on my sister's couch while saving for repairs." She set the trash can down. "This school got storage closets nobody checks but me. Clean. Ones with locks on the inside, just saying." Their eyes met and understanding passed between them. "Thank you," Ursula whispered. "But I'm managing." "Managing ain't living, honey," Gloria sighed. "Least let me give you a key to the staff shower in the gym. Used to be for PE teachers, but nobody uses it now that we don't have sports funding." The offer of a reliable private shower was too tempting to refuse. Ursula accepted the key with grateful hands, careful to keep her expression neutral even as relief washed through her. That evening, after the building had emptied, she experienced her first hot shower in weeks. The small tiled room echoed with the sound of running water and her muffled sobs of gratitude. She washed her hair twice, savoring the feeling of being truly clean. Afterward, she hand-washed her undergarments in the sink and hung them discreetly on the shower rod to dry overnight. If the security cameras caught her entering early the next morning to retrieve her clothes, no one mentioned it. Chapter 4. "I need volunteers for the Thanksgiving food drive," announced Vanessa Klein, the PTA president, sweeping into the teacher's lounge with clipboards and an air of determined festivity. "Each classroom should prepare at least 3 baskets for needy families." Ursula stared into her mug of tepid coffee, trying to become invisible. Around her, other teachers murmured in agreement, already discussing ways to encourage student participation. "Ursula, your class did those lovely handwritten cards last year," Vanessa continued, oblivious to Ursula's discomfort. "Perhaps they could do that again." "Of course," Ursula nodded, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. The irony wasn't lost on her. She would be helping prepare food baskets for needy families, while her own dinner would likely come from the discounted day-old bread shelf at the supermarket. "Excellent. Oh, and we're asking each teacher to contribute $20 toward gift cards that will accompany the baskets." $20. Ursula mentally calculated her remaining funds until the next payday. $43 to last 9 days. Gasoline, laundry, her phone bill, each necessity already carefully budgeted. "I'll bring it tomorrow," she promised, knowing she would somehow make it work. Perhaps she could skip laundering her clothes this week. Perhaps the quarter tank of gas could stretch a few days longer if she parked closer to the school. After the meeting, Victor Reyes, the music teacher, fell into, stepped beside her as they walked back to their classrooms. "She's exhausting," he commented with a good-natured eye roll. "Last year she made me play piano at 3 different fundraisers, pro bono of course, because it's for the children." Ursula smiled despite herself. Victor was new this year, younger than most of the staff, with an energy that his students adored, and a talent that seemed wasted in their underfunded music program. "Vanessa means well," she offered. "Her heart's in the right place." "Maybe, but she has no idea what it's like for most families here." He hesitated. "Or for most teachers, for that matter. My apartment building had the nerve to raise rent by $100 this month. On a first-year teacher's salary, that's brutal." Ursula nodded sympathetically, though $100 for rent adjustment seemed almost laughable compared to having no rent at all, just the constant fear of her car being towed with all her possessions inside. "You should come to the district housing meeting tomorrow night," Victor continued. A bunch of us are going to speak about the need for affordable teacher housing. Some districts in California have started building apartments specifically for educators. We're trying to get something similar here. That sounds promising." Her voice caught on the word. How long had it been since she'd allowed herself to hope for solutions? "It's at the Union Hall at 6. I could give you a ride if you want. Maybe grab dinner after." His offer was casual, but his eyes held a warmth that Ursula hadn't encountered in a long time. The invitation startled her, both the professional opportunity and the personal connection it represented. For a moment she was tempted to accept, to pretend she was just a normal colleague dealing with normal financial struggles. "Thank you, but I have other commitments," she said finally. The thought of explaining her situation was unbearable, and maintaining the facade through an entire evening seemed impossible. Victor looked disappointed but nodded. "Another time, maybe. The meeting happens monthly." As he walked away, Ursula wondered what it would be like to have another time, a future where possibilities existed beyond daily survival. The thought lingered as she returned to her classroom, where her students were filing back from recess, their faces bright with youth and possibility. Devon Henderson arrived last, lagging behind the others with dark circles under his eyes that mirrored Ursula's own. "Rough night?" she asked quietly as he passed her desk. He shrugged. "Grandma's night shift got extended. Had to watch my little brother till she got home at 3. Ursula reached into her desk drawer and pulled out one of the granola bars she kept for emergencies, her own lunch for the day. "Fuel for your brain," she said, placing it on his desk when the other students weren't looking. The boy's grateful smile illuminated something inside her that had been growing dangerously dim. That night, alone in her car, Ursula removed $20 from her emergency fund envelope, money she'd been saving toward a rental deposit someday, and placed it in an envelope for the Thanksgiving drive. Some sacrifices were worth making, even when the cost was high. What she couldn't know, was that her world was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. That the letter already making its way through the postal system would arrive within days, bearing no return address, containing just 10 words that would alter the course of her life forever. The envelope, crisp and official, would sit in her faculty mailbox like a ticking clock, waiting to be discovered. Will Ursula find a permanent home before winter arrives? Can she maintain her teaching standards while struggling to meet her basic needs? What life-changing event will the mysterious letter bring? Chapter 5. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, tucked between a staff meeting reminder and a fundraiser flyer in Ursula's faculty mailbox. Plain white envelope, official-looking but unmarked, except for her name typed on the front. No return address. She almost discarded it, mistaking it for junk mail or a credit card solicitation. Those had been finding her still, ironically addressed to the home she no longer owned. But something about the envelope's weight, its crisp corners, made her slip it into her lesson planner instead. Hours later, huddled in her car while rain drummed steadily on the roof, she sliced it open with her only luxury, a silver letter opener that had been Edward's graduation gift from his parents. The heavy cream stationery inside bore a simple message: "You are invited to the National Palace, April 7th, 10 a.m. Ursula stared at the words, turning the paper over, looking for additional information, an explanation, context, finding none. Was this someone's idea of a cruel joke? A misdelivered invitation meant for another Ursula Matthews. There had to be hundreds in the country. The National Palace. She vaguely recalled the historic building from a teachers' conference years ago. Ornate architecture, marble halls, security checkpoints, a place where governmental ceremonies and diplomatic receptions occurred, not a place that invited homeless teachers for morning visits. She returned the letter to its envelope, tucking it into the glove compartment alongside her husband's life insurance policy, the one that had barely covered his funeral expenses and her teaching credentials. Meaningless papers, all of them in the face of her current reality. Yet, something about those 10 words tugged at her imagination as she settled beneath her blankets, listening to the storm intensify outside. April 7th was nearly 5 months away. By then, she'd be unemployed, perhaps even more desperate than she was now, if such a thing were possible. Sleep came fitfully that night, punctuated by dreams of marble corridors where she wandered, searching for someone who knew why she had been summoned, only to discover she was still wearing her nightgown, still carrying her shame like a visible stain others pointed to and whispered about. Thursday morning brought new troubles. The Oldsmobile's battery, weakened by age, and the drain of serving as both transportation and shelter, failed to start. Ursula sat motionless behind the wheel, watching her breath form small clouds in the frigid air, weighing her options. The school was 2 miles away. Walking distance technically, though not in professional shoes, not carrying teaching materials, not in time to prepare before students arrived. She could call a cab, but that expense would devastate her carefully managed budget. She could call in sick, but that would mean no pay for the day, which she couldn't afford either. In the end, she shouldered her tote bag containing her teaching essentials and began walking, grateful at least that the rain had stopped. The cold bit through her inadequate coat and her sensible pumps, never designed for actual miles of walking, began creating blisters within the first half hour. She arrived at Westbridge Elementary flushed, disheveled, and 17 minutes late. Principal Walton noticed immediately. "The school day begins at 7:45, Mrs. Matthews," he remarked pointedly as she hurried past his office. "Students rely on consistency." "Car trouble," she explained, not slowing. "My class is waiting." Indeed they were, 27 fifth graders, being monitored by a harried-looking administrative assistant who shot Ursula a grateful look before escaping. "Good morning, loves," Ursula greeted them, setting down her bag and slipping off her coat to reveal sweat stains under the arms of her blouse. "I apologize for my tardiness. Sometimes life hands us unexpected challenges, like pop quizzes," quipped Miguel from the back row, earning chuckles. "More like dead car batteries," she answered honestly. "Now who remembers where we left off in our state history lesson yesterday?" The day unfolded in a blur of lessons, corridor duties, and mounting anxiety about how she would get the car started again. During her lunch period, 27 minutes that she spent helping a struggling student with reading comprehension rather than eating, Gloria, the custodian, appeared at her classroom door. "Heard about your car," she said without preamble. "My nephew's a mechanic. He'll come by after school, give you a jump start, no charge." Ursula's throat tightened with gratitude. "I couldn't impose." "Ain't imposing if I'm offering," Gloria cut her off. "We take care of our own around here. Well, some of us do anyway." Her pointed glance toward the administrative wing spoke volumes. True to her word, Gloria's nephew, Marcus, appeared in the parking lot as Ursula was preparing to begin her long walk back to wherever she would park for the night. Young, with kind eyes and capable hands, he had her car running within minutes and refused the $10 she tried to press upon him. "Just remember me when you teaching my kids someday," he said with a grin. "I got twins starting kindergarten next fall." The small kindness, one of several she had experienced in recent days, lodged in her chest like a warm coal, sustaining her as she drove to the library to charge her phone and plan her next moves. The car battery wouldn't last forever. It needed to be replaced soon, another expense she couldn't afford. As she sat at a quiet study table, Ursula found herself removing the mysterious invitation from her bag, studying it again in the libraries. Fluorescent lighting. "You are invited to the National Palace April 7th, 10 a.m. No signature, no explanation. Just an invitation to a place where someone like her would surely be stopped at the door, turned away for her obvious poverty, her lack of credentials, her invisibility. Still, a tiny flame of curiosity flickered to life inside her. Who would have sent such an invitation, and why? The questions followed her back to the car that evening, where she parked in the hospital garage, safer from the plummeting temperatures that local news was calling unseasonable and concerning. That night, as she huddled beneath her blankets and watched her breath form clouds in the darkness, Ursula allowed herself a dangerous luxury: imagination. She pictured herself walking confidently into the National Palace, being recognized, being welcomed, being seen finally by someone who mattered. The fantasy was so compelling that she didn't immediately notice the shadow passing by her car window or the face peering briefly inside before moving on, a security guard making his rounds, shining his flashlight systematically across the parked vehicles pausing at hers just long enough to illuminate the shape of a person attempting to sleep in the reclined driver's seat. She froze, holding her breath. Discovery could mean being asked to leave, or worse, police involvement. Questions she couldn't answer without revealing her homelessness, maybe even calls to school administration. The light lingered for what felt like eternity, then moved. On. Ursula exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. Another close call. Another reminder of her precarious existence. In that moment, the invitation in her glove compartment seemed even more absurd. A woman who couldn't even legally park overnight was being summoned to the seat of power. Impossible. Ridiculous. Yet as she drifted toward uneasy sleep, the words followed her into dreams. You are invited. Chapter 6. December arrived with biting winds and the constant threat of snow. Westbridge Elementary transformed overnight into a winter wonderland of student artwork, paper snowflakes dangling from ceilings, construction paper mittens lining hallways, counts of days until winter break prominently displayed in each classroom. In Ursula's room, a paper chain stretched across one wall, each link representing one more day of her employment. Her students had no idea of its significance. To them it was simply a festive decoration. To her it was a countdown to unemployment. 14 links remained. The faculty holiday party was scheduled for Friday evening, a potluck affair in the school cafeteria, where teachers would exchange modest gifts, and Principal Walton would deliver his annual State of the School address, heavy on administrative achievements and light on actual educational milestones. You're coming, right? Victor asked, popping his head into her classroom during the final bell. I hear Ellen from second grade is bringing her famous eggnog, supposedly non-alcoholic, but no one believes her. Ursula looked up from organizing. Reading folders. I haven't decided yet. Come on, it'll be fun. Well, as fun as anything with Walton making speeches can be. He grinned, leaning against the doorframe. I'll save you a seat. His persistence was endearing, but the logistics were daunting. The potluck required bringing a dish to share, impossible from a car with no cooking facilities. The gift exchange meant spending money she didn't have, and the very idea of making small talk with colleagues who had homes to return to afterward seemed unbearable. We'll see, she answered non-committally. After Victor left, Ursula continued preparing for tomorrow's lessons with mechanical efficiency. The classroom was her sanctuary, the one place where her competence was unquestionable, where her homelessness didn't define her. Soon even that would be gone. She had applied to 17 schools in neighboring districts. So far, 12 had sent polite rejection emails citing hiring freezes or lack of mid-year openings. 5 hadn't responded at all. Substitute teaching might be an option, but the unreliable income would make her situation even more precarious. As the classroom emptied of students, a small figure lingered at the doorway. Tasha Williams, a quiet girl with enormous talent and equally enormous challenges at home. Mrs. Matthews, can I ask you something? Her voice was barely audible. Of course, sweetheart. Are you leaving us? Jaden said his mom heard you were getting fired. The bluntness of children. Ursula motioned for Tasha to sit in the desk nearest her own. My position is being eliminated after winter break, she explained gently. It's not because of anything I did wrong or anything you students did. It's just budget cuts. Tasha finished for her. That's what they always say when they take away the good things. The simple truth of this statement momentarily robbed Ursula of words. Will you go to another school? The girl continued. One where the kids are richer and they have enough money. Ursula reached for Tasha's hand. I don't know where I'll go next, but I do know that for the next 2 weeks I'm still your teacher, and I intend to make every single day count. Tasha nodded solemnly, then reached into her backpack and withdrew a slightly crumpled paper. I wrote this for you. It's not homework or anything, just something I thought about. The paper contained a poem written in the careful cursive Ursula had been teaching them. Some people shine so bright they don't know their lights for others walking. In darkness these lights think they're ordinary, but without them, the night would win. Tasha, this is beautiful, Ursula whispered, her vision blurring. "May I keep it?" The girl nodded, seeming pleased though embarrassed by the praise. "Grandma says you're the best teacher this school ever had. She says they're fools to let you go." "Your grandmother is very kind." Ursula carefully placed the poem in her lesson planner between the pages for next week. "And you have a remarkable gift with words." After Tasha left, Ursula sat alone in her classroom, surrounded by the evidence of learning, student work on the walls, books on shelves, the comfortable clutter of a space where young minds were engaged daily. How could she leave all this? And yet how could she stay in a system that had no place for her? That evening she drove to a discount grocery store 20 miles away, where she was less likely to encounter parents or colleagues. There she splurged on ingredients for a simple pasta salad, the least expensive option she could think of for the potluck. She would prepare it in the staff bathroom sink tomorrow morning, early before anyone arrived. The holiday party was as awkward as she'd feared. Teachers clustered in familiar groups, sharing inside jokes and stories of family traditions. Ursula stood on the periphery, her pasta salad barely touched on the overcrowded buffet table. She'd wrapped her white elephant gift, a scented candle she'd received last Christmas and never used, in paper saved from a student's birthday celebration months ago. Victor found her hiding near the dessert table and guided her to a seat beside him, introducing her to several younger teachers she hadn't met before. His kindness was a lifeline in the sea of festivity that highlighted her isolation. "I hear you're not returning after break," said a kindergarten teacher whose name Ursula couldn't recall. "Any exciting plans?" Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal her desperation, Victor intervened. "Ursula's got some interesting opportunities she's exploring," he said smoothly, "including that housing initiative I mentioned to you last week. Right, Ursula?" She nodded, grateful for the rescue but uncomfortable with the implication that she had options, plans, a future mapped out. Later, as teachers began gathering their serving dishes and leftover food, Gloria approached with a foil-covered plate. "Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and 2 slices of pie," she murmured, pressing it into Ursula's hands. "My contribution to the potluck, but I'm watching my figure," she winked. "Would be a shame to throw it away." Again that knowing look, that quiet understanding. Ursula accepted the plate with murmured thanks, wondering how many others had guessed her secret. In the parking lot, Victor walked her to her car, his breath visible in the frigid air. "So, any plans for the break?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes searching. "Just the usual. Rest. Catch up on reading." The lies came easily now. "Listen, a bunch of us are getting together for Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy, just a potluck at my place. You should come." His invitation was sincere, his expression hopeful. For a moment, Ursula allowed herself to imagine it. A warm apartment, laughter, belonging. The fantasy dissolved under the weight of reality. By Christmas, she might be even more obviously homeless. How would she explain showing up with unwashed hair, wearing the same clothes as before? "Thank you, but I have family obligations," she said, the words tasting bitter. Victor looked disappointed but nodded. "Of course. Family first." As he walked away, Ursula slid into her car, her home, her prison, her last refuge. She placed Gloria's generous plate of food on the passenger seat and started the engine, letting it run for a few precious minutes to warm the interior before shutting it off to conserve gas. The mysterious invitation caught her eye in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, peeking out from where she kept it in the center console now. April 7th seemed impossibly distant, a date that belonged to another woman, another life. She ate Gloria's food slowly, savoring each bite, watching other teachers drive away to their homes, their lives, their belonging. When the parking lot had emptied, she reclined her seat and prepared for another cold night, another day of pretending, another link removed from her paper chain countdown. 12 links remained. How much longer could she maintain this precarious balance between pride and survival? And what would happen when there were no more links to remove, no more classrooms to hide in, no more excuses to offer? What life-altering event awaits Ursula at the National Palace? Will she find help before her teaching position ends? What connection might exist between her mysterious invitation and her current struggles? Chapter 7. The breaking point came. 3 days before Christmas, with just 2 paper links remaining on Ursula's classroom chain. It began innocuously enough. The school was celebrating with classroom parties, an assembly featuring the remaining music program, Victor conducting enthusiastically despite budget cuts that had halved his resources, and an early dismissal. The usual controlled chaos of the last day before winter break. Ursula had splurged on small gifts for each of her students, bookmarks made from craft supplies purchased with her own dwindling funds, each featuring a personalized encouragement. Her farewell gifts, though the children didn't know it yet. Principal Walton had announced that morning's assembly would include staffing updates, which she assumed would be his public acknowledgement of her departure. The temperature had plummeted overnight to 17 degrees, breaking records for their region and straining the school's aging heating system. Students kept their coats on in the classrooms. Teachers clutched mugs of coffee for warmth as much as caffeine. Ursula had spent the night in the hospital parking garage again, running the car's heater for 10-minute intervals every hour, terrified of carbon monoxide poisoning, but equally afraid of freezing. She was exhausted, her hands chapped and red, her mind foggy from cold and insufficient sleep. Still, she maintained her smile, her gentle corrections, her professional demeanor. It was the only currency she had left, her dignity as an educator. The assembly began at 11:30. Students filed into the gymnasium, sitting cross-legged on the polished floor, teachers standing along the perimeter. Principal Walton took the microphone, his voice echoing metallically through the cavernous space. Before we enjoy the music program, I have several important announcements regarding changes coming in the new year. Ursula steeled herself, staring straight ahead, determined to absorb her public dismissal with grace. First, I'm pleased to share that Westbridge Elementary has been selected for a technology grant that will provide new tablets for our 3rd through 5th grade classrooms. Surprised murmurs rippled through the faculty. This was unexpected news. Additionally, Walton continued, the school board has approved our request for a part-time reading specialist to support our literacy intervention program. Ursula blinked in confusion. This was not the announcement she had been expecting. And finally, he said, his voice dropping to a more somber tone, I must inform you that due to budgetary constraints, we will be implementing staff reductions after the break. Here it was. Ursula took a deep breath, steeling herself. Our 5th grade teaching team will be reduced by 1 position. He paused, scanning the room. Mrs. Matthews, would you stand, please? On shaking legs, Ursula rose. The fluorescent light seemed suddenly too bright. The gymnasium too warm despite the failing heating system. She felt every eye turned toward her. Students, colleagues, parents who had come for the performance. Mrs. Matthews has been with us for only a short time, Principal Walton continued, but her impact has been significant. Unfortunately, as our most recent hire in the 5th grade team, her position will be eliminated effective December 31st. The words fell like stones in the silent gymnasium. Then something unexpected happened. From the cross-legged rows of students, Jaden Wilson stood up. That's not right, he said clearly, his young voice carrying across the gymnasium. Mrs. Matthews is the best teacher we've ever had. Principal Walton's expression tightened. Thank you for your input, Jaden. Please sit down. But Tasha was standing now too. She helps us when we don't understand. She stays late, she gives us her own snacks when we're hungry. That's enough, Walton said, his voice harder. This is an administrative decision that she taught me to read. Devon's quiet voice came from the back. Nobody else ever took the time. One by one, other students stood, not just from Ursula's class, but from throughout the school. Children she had helped during lunch periods, students she had tutored after hours, kids whose names she remembered in the hallway when everyone else walked past. Ursula felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she didn't dare let them fall. Not here, not now. Gloria the custodian moved to stand beside her, a silent presence of support. Victor joined them, then Ellen from 2nd grade, then others, a quiet demonstration of solidarity that no one had planned, but everyone seemed to understand. Principal Walton's face had gone from annoyed to alarmed. Parents were murmuring. Phones were being raised to record the spontaneous protest. This was not the tidy end-of-semester celebration he had envisioned. "Perhaps," he said, clearing his throat, "we should move on to the music program. Mr. Reyes, are your students ready to perform?" The moment broke. Students returned to their seats. The assembly continued with holiday songs, and Ursula slipped out the side door, needing air, needing space, needing to process what had just happened. Outside, snow had begun to fall in fat, lazy flakes that melted on the pavement. Ursula leaned against the brick wall, gulping cold air, trying to steady herself. The gymnasium door opened behind her. Gloria stepped out, pulling her maintenance jacket tighter around her shoulders. "You okay, honey?" Ursula nodded wordlessly. "That was something in there," Gloria continued, coming to stand beside her. "Never seen kids stand up like that before. Not for a teacher, not for anybody." "It won't change anything," Ursula whispered. "Maybe not, but it matters that they did it." Gloria studied her for a long moment. "You've been living in your car, haven't you?" The direct question, spoken with such gentle certainty, broke through Ursula's carefully constructed walls. She nodded, a single tear escaping despite her resolve. "Thought so. I seen it before." Gloria sighed heavily. "My sister's apartment has a spare room. It ain't much, just a twin bed and a dresser, but it's warm. Got its own bathroom too. She been trying to rent it out for months with no takers." Ursula shook her head. "I couldn't." "Rent's $300 a month, utilities included," Gloria continued as if she hadn't spoken. "First month free for a teacher who's been sleeping in a parking garage with the temperature dropping below freezing." The offer was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. $300 was manageable, even with uncertain employment prospects. A real bed, a bathroom, warmth. "Why would you do this?" Ursula asked, her voice barely audible. Gloria's expression softened. "My boy had a teacher once who saw him. Really saw him when nobody else did, changed his life. Now he's in college, first in our family. Sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to give up." Inside the gymnasium, applause erupted as the music program concluded. Soon students would be dismissed. Parents would gather their children. The school would empty for 2 weeks of winter break, and Ursula would no longer have her classroom as sanctuary. "The room's yours if you want it," Gloria said. "No papers to sign, no credit check, no deposit. Just a key and an address." It was a turning point, Ursula realized. A moment when the universe offered not justice, not a grand solution, but a small measure of grace. A room. A key. An address where the mysterious invitation could be delivered in April rather than lost in the administrative shuffle of her departure. From Westbridge. "Yes," she whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue after so many months of declining help, of maintaining her isolation. "Thank you." That afternoon, as students filed out for the break, they pressed handmade cards into her hands, hugged her fiercely, extracted promises that she would visit. Victor gave her a gift bag containing a beautiful scarf and a note with his phone number. "For coffee sometime," he said with a hopeful smile. "As friends or colleagues or whatever you want." Ursula cleaned out her desk, packed her personal teaching materials, and took one last look at the classroom that had been her haven. The paper chain hung with its final 2 links, her last 2 days of employment. She removed them, folded them carefully, and placed them in her purse alongside Tasha's poem and the mysterious invitation, reminders of what had been, what was, and what might yet be. That evening, she followed Gloria's car to a modest apartment complex on the east side of town. Her sister, Marlene, a night shift nurse with Gloria's same warm eyes and no nonsense, Manna showed Ursula to a small but clean room with a twin bed, a dresser, a nightstand, and blessed privacy. "Bathroom's through there," Marlene said, pointing to a door. "Towels in the cabinet. Kitchen privileges included. Just clean up after yourself. I sleep days mostly, so you'll hardly see me." "I don't know how to thank you," Ursula began. Marlene waved away her gratitude. "Gloria says you're good people, having a hard time. Been there myself. Get some rest. Things look different after a real night's sleep in a real bed." For the first time in 8 months, Ursula showered without rushing, slept without fear and woke without the immediate press of survival foremost in her mind. It was December 23rd. Outside, snow continued to fall. Inside, a small miracle had occurred. Not a solution to all her problems, but a respite, a chance to breathe, to think, to plan beyond the next 24 hours. On the nightstand, she placed the mysterious invitation where she could see it each morning. You are invited to the National Palace, April 7th, 10:00 a.m. It seemed less absurd now, less impossible. Whatever awaited her there, she would face it with the dignity that even homelessness had not stolen from her. Until then, she had a room, a key, and the memory of students standing for her when it mattered most. Have you ever known someone who maintained their dignity and purpose through incredible hardship like Ursula? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 8. January arrived with bitter cold and new beginnings. Ursula's room in Marlene's apartment had transformed from a temporary shelter to something approaching a home. Her few possessions, clothes, books, Edward's photograph, no longer lived in bags and boxes, but occupied proper places in drawers and on shelves. The silver-framed photo of her husband watched over her from the nightstand, his smile unchanged by the dramatic shifts in her circumstances. Finding work had proven more challenging than she'd anticipated. Substitute teaching. Positions were scarce during the post-holiday period, and the few calls she'd received barely covered her modest rent. Still, she had shelter, food, and something she hadn't possessed in nearly a year: hope. The mysterious invitation remained on her nightstand, a daily reminder that April 7th approached, now just 3 months away. In idle moments, she found herself imagining what might await her at the National Palace, though each scenario seemed more implausible than the last. On a bitterly cold Tuesday in mid-January, Ursula received a call from a number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Matthews, this is Vanessa Klein from the PTA at Westbridge. The voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, Ursula replied, curiosity overtaking her initial wariness. She hadn't expected to hear from anyone at Westbridge after her departure. I'm calling because, well, this is a bit unusual, but several parents have approached me about organizing private tutoring sessions for their children, with you specifically. Vanessa paused. The students' test scores have declined since winter break, and frankly, many of them miss you terribly. The news sent a conflicting rush of emotions through Ursula: validation, sadness, a flicker of professional satisfaction. I see, she said carefully, and Principal Walton is aware of this request. This would be entirely separate from Westbridge. Several families are willing to pay privately for after-school tutoring at the public library or a similar location. Vanessa's voice dropped slightly. Between us, Walton's popularity has taken a significant hit since the assembly incident. The school board has received numerous complaints about your dismissal. Ursula considered the offer. Private tutoring would provide steadier income than substitute teaching, with the added benefit of reconnecting with students she'd grown to love. I'd be interested, she said finally. Please share my contact information with the parents. Within a week, Ursula had established a tutoring schedule that included 8 of her former students, including Jaden, Tasha, and Devon. They met at the public library 4 afternoons a week, working on reading comprehension, mathematical concepts, and the writing skills that standardized tests increasingly demanded, but classroom time rarely allowed to develop naturally. The children threw themselves into these sessions with enthusiasm that both warmed and broke Ursula's heart. They had missed her. They needed her. And the system that should have prioritized their education had deemed her expendable. One Thursday afternoon, as their session concluded, Tasha lingered behind the others. Mrs. Matthews, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. The girl twisted the straps of her backpack nervously. Are you coming back to Westbridge? My mum heard some parents are trying to get you rehired. Ursula carefully packed away her teaching materials, buying time to formulate a response that wouldn't burden the child with adult complexities. I don't know what the future holds, she answered truthfully. Right now I'm grateful for the chance to continue working with you and the others. But you're not homeless anymore, right? Tasha asked, with the directness that only children possess. Grandma said she thought you might have been living in your car before. The question landed like a physical blow. Ursula froze, her hands suddenly clumsy with the papers she'd been organizing. "What makes your grandmother think that?" she asked, keeping her voice steady with effort. Tasha shrugged. "She cleans offices at night. Said she's seen people living in cars before and you had the same look. Tired but trying to hide it. She says people don't choose that life. Life chooses it for them sometimes. Wisdom from unexpected sources." Ursula sat down on the library chair, bringing herself to eye level with the girl. "Your grandmother is very perceptive," she said quietly. "Yes, for a while I was without a permanent home, but I have a room now and things are improving." "Was it scary?" Tasha's expression was solemn, her eyes wide with concern. "Sometimes," Ursula admitted, "but you know what helped the most? Coming to school each day, teaching wonderful students like you, feeling like I was making a difference. That gave me strength when things were difficult." Tasha nodded thoughtfully. "I'm writing a story about a teacher who becomes a superhero at night. She helps people who don't have homes find safe places to sleep." "That sounds like an important story," Ursula said, her throat tight with emotion. "I'd love to read it when you're finished. I'll bring it next time." Tasha shouldered her backpack. "And Mrs. Matthews, I'm glad you're not in your car anymore." After Tasha left, Ursula remained seated at the library table, composing herself. The children had known, or at least suspected, more than she'd realized. They had seen her struggle even as she'd tried desperately to hide it. Yet instead of judgment, they had offered solidarity. Instead of pity, respect. Their response challenged everything she'd believed about the shame of homelessness, about the necessity of maintaining appearances at all costs. That evening, she returned to her room feeling lighter somehow, as if a burden had shifted. She prepared a simple dinner in Marlene's kitchen, then settled at the small desk in her room to plan the next day's tutoring sessions. As she worked, her phone signaled a text message from Victor. "Heard you're tutoring the kids. They're lucky to have you still fighting for them. Coffee sometime? As friends or colleagues or whatever you want. No pressure." His persistence made her smile. Maybe, she thought, it was time to stop hiding. Time to allow connections. Time to accept that her experience, difficult as it had been, had value, had shaped her into someone stronger than before. She typed a response. Coffee would be nice. As friends. The silver-framed photograph of Edward seemed to watch her with approval as she set down the phone. He had always encouraged her to reach outward when hardship made her want to retreat inward. "The world needs your light," he told her during his final days. "Don't let any darkness dim it." With that memory warming her, Ursula turned her attention back to her lesson plans, to the students who still needed her, to the mysterious invitation that promised an unknown future in April, and to the possibility that the worst of her journey might finally be behind her. Have you ever been surprised by someone seeing strength in you that you didn't know you had? Share your experience in the comments below. Chapter 9. February brought unseasonable warmth, melting the last of January's snow and coaxing early crocuses from the soil. For Ursula, it brought changes as well. Some welcomed, others unexpected. Her tutoring business had expanded to 12 students, requiring multiple sessions throughout the week. The public library, initially accommodating, had begun to express concerns about the commercial nature of her activities in their space. Ursula understood their position, but faced a dilemma. Where else could she meet her students? The answer came from an unexpected source. Victor had begun joining her for coffee after her Tuesday sessions, their conversations gradually evolving from cautious collegiality to genuine friendship. When she mentioned her predicament, he offered an immediate solution. "Use my music room," he said. "It's empty after 3 every day and the acoustics are great, not just for singing but for voices in general. Perfect for group lessons." His offer initially seemed fraught with complications. Returning to Westbridge, even after hours, meant potentially encountering Principal Walton or other administrators who might object to her presence. Yet the practical benefits were undeniable. A proper classroom space with tables, chairs, and a whiteboard would vastly improve her tutoring capabilities. "Won't you get in trouble?" she asked. Victor shrugged, stirring his coffee. "Teachers can have guests on campus for educational purposes. You're my guest. Besides," he added with a grin, "Walton leaves precisely at 3:15 every day, like clockwork." With that settled, Ursula's tutoring sessions moved to the Westbridge music room. The familiar surroundings energized her students, who delighted in showing her the projects they'd completed since her departure. Their new teacher, Mrs. Campbell, was okay, according to most accounts, but not the same, according to others. "She doesn't remember our birthdays," Jaden told her one afternoon, "and she doesn't have special jobs for everyone like you did." Ursula gently redirected such comments, careful not to undermine their current teacher, while still acknowledging their feelings. "Change is always difficult," she would say. "Give yourself time to adjust and try to appreciate Mrs. Campbell's different strengths." One Wednesday afternoon, as her students were packing up after a particularly productive session focused on fractions, Gloria appeared in the doorway. "Thought I recognized those voices," she said with a warm smile. "Place hasn't been the same without you, Mrs. Matthews." The children crowded around Gloria, who had always been a favorite with her kind. Manna and occasional treats slipped to those she knew needed them most. As they chatted, Ursula noticed Gloria's expression shift to something more serious. "Can you stay a minute after they leave?" she asked quietly. Ursula nodded, a flutter of apprehension in her chest. After the last student had been collected, by waiting parents, Gloria closed the music room door. "Heard something you should know," she said without preamble. "School board's meeting tonight. Word is they're reconsidering some of the staffing cuts from December, including yours." Ursula stared at her. "That's not possible. They've already hired Mrs. Campbell to replace me." "On a temporary contract," Gloria clarified. "Turns out she's leaving at the end of the school year regardless. Husband got transferred. Plus," she added with a hint of satisfaction, "test scores are down in 5th grade, way down, and parents have been making noise, lots of noise." The information was disorienting. Ursula had begun to rebuild her life around the assumption that her Westbridge career was over. The possibility of returning, of having steady income, benefits, her own classroom again, seemed both tantalizing and terrifying. "Why would they want me back after dismissing me?" she asked, her practical side asserting itself. "It would be an admission that they made a mistake." Gloria's expression turned knowing. "Sometimes facing a mistake is better than living with its consequences. I hear 3 board members have kids who are struggling since you left." Amazing how personal interest can change perspectives. That evening, Ursula found herself unable to focus on lesson planning or the novel she'd been reading. The possibility of reinstatement consumed her thoughts, raising questions about what she truly wanted. The tutoring business was growing, offering freedom and direct impact without administrative interference. Yet the financial stability of a teaching position was undeniable, as was the reach she could have with a full classroom of students. Her phone chimed with a text from Victor. "Board voted 4-1 to reinstate your position effective March 1st. Walton looks like he swallowed a lemon. Call me." March 1st. Just over a month before the mysterious palace invitation, the timing seemed significant, though she couldn't articulate why. Marlene found her sitting at the kitchen table staring at her phone. "Good news or bad?" she asked, setting down her nurse's bag. "Good, I think," Ursula replied, showing her the text. "They want me back at Westbridge." Marlene nodded approvingly. "About time they recognized what they lost. Gloria says those kids haven't been the same since you left." She paused, studying Ursula's expression. "You don't seem as happy as I'd expect." "I am happy," Ursula insisted, then sighed. "It's just complicated. Going back means facing people who decided I wasn't worth keeping. It means working under Principal Walton, who let me go without a second thought. Means health insurance too," Marlene pointed out practically, "and retirement contributions, stability." "I know," Ursula acknowledged, "and I miss having my own classroom, building relationships with students over a full year, being part of a school community, even with its flaws." Marlene squeezed her shoulder as she moved past to put away groceries. Sleep on it. Decision'll be clearer in the morning. That night, as Ursula prepared for bed, her gaze fell on the mysterious invitation still displayed on her nightstand. You are invited to the National Palace, April 7th, 10 COM. The words remained unchanged, yet something about them seemed different now, less a random anomaly and more a piece of a larger pattern she was only beginning to discern. Whatever awaited her at the National Palace, she would face it from a position of strength rather than desperation. Whether she accepted the teaching position or continued her independent work, she was no longer the woman who had sobbed in her car, questioning her value and purpose. The next morning, she called the school board office and accepted the reinstatement offer. 2 weeks later, she stood once again before her 5th grade classroom, the same physical space she had left in December, yet transformed by subtle differences. New student work adorned the walls. Desks had been rearranged. Mrs. Campbell's organizational systems had replaced her own. Yet the children's faces remained gloriously familiar, older by mere months, but somehow changed in less tangible ways. They greeted her with enthusiasm that bordered on chaos until she raised her hand in the familiar signal that requested their attention. Silence fell. 27 pairs of eyes focused on her. Waiting. Ready. "Good morning, loves," she said, the words feeling like coming home. "We have a lot of learning to catch up on." And just like that, she was teaching again, guiding discussions, asking questions, watching understanding dawn in young eyes. The rhythm of the classroom embraced her like an old friend, comfortable yet always challenging, familiar yet never, routine. After school, she lingered at her desk, reacquainting herself with the space that was once again hers. Principal Walton appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "The transition seems to be going smoothly," he observed. Ursula nodded. "The students have been very adaptable." An awkward silence stretched between them, history unacknowledged, tensions unresolved. "The board was quite insistent on your return," he said finally. "They rarely involve themselves so directly in staffing decisions." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue working with these children." Another pause, then, "Well, welcome back, Mrs. Matthews." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, the 5th grade team wasn't the same without you. It wasn't an apology, but perhaps it was as close as she would get." Ursula accepted it with a nod, understanding that sometimes bridges couldn't be fully repaired, only carefully traversed with mutual caution. As March unfolded, Ursula settled back into the rhythms of full-time teaching while maintaining after-school, tutoring sessions twice weekly. Victor continued to offer his music room, now simply as a courtesy rather than a necessity. Their coffee meetings evolved into occasional dinners, conversations extending beyond school matters to books, music, dreams deferred and reconsidered. "Have you ever thought about going back to school?" he asked one evening over pasta at a small Italian restaurant. "For your masters, I mean." Ursula laughed softly. "About 1,000 times. Before Edward got sick, I was actually enrolled in a literacy specialist program. Had to withdraw when—" She trailed off, memories surfacing. Victor waited, giving her space for emotions that didn't need explanations or apologies. "Maybe someday," she continued finally, "when things are more stable. They're offering loan forgiveness for teachers in high-need schools now," he mentioned casually. "Gloria's nephew, you remember Marcus? He's going part-time for his teaching certificate, full scholarship." The information planted a seed, more possibility in a life that had begun to feel expansive again, rather than constricted. Ursula tucked it away for future consideration, alongside other dreams that had begun to feel possible again. As March waned, bringing spring rains and the promise of renewal, Ursula found herself counting days again, not with dread as before, but with curious anticipation. The mysterious invitation loomed larger as April 7th approached. 2 weeks, 10 days, a week. Whatever awaited her at the National Palace, she would face it as a woman reclaiming her place in the world, step by determined step. Chapter 10. April arrived with a riot of dogwood blossoms and the nervous energy of approaching standardized tests. For Ursula's students, these assessments represented a chance to demonstrate their progress since her return. For Ursula herself, they were both a professional focus and a welcome distraction from the approaching date that had lingered in her mind for months. April 7th, the National Palace, 10 a.m. The mysterious invitation had taken on almost mythical proportions in C. Her imagination, a test perhaps, or a bizarre clerical error, or something entirely inexplicable. She had considered ignoring it entirely, dismissing it as irrelevant now that her life had begun to stabilize. Yet curiosity persisted, along with a strange certainty that she was meant to be there, that some thread of destiny had been quietly weaving its way through the fabric of her difficult journey. On April 6th, after her final student left for the day, Ursula found Victor leaning against the doorframe of her classroom, arms crossed, wearing an expression of amused concern. "You've been distracted all week," he observed. "Standardized test anxiety getting to you too?" She smiled, appreciating his perceptiveness. Over the past months, their friendship had deepened into something comfortable yet undefined, neither rushing toward nor retreating from the potential it held. "Not exactly," she admitted, deciding impulsively to share the mystery that had occupied her thoughts. She withdrew the cream-colored invitation from her desk drawer and handed it to him. This arrived back in December when I was still struggling. Victor read the simple message, his eyebrows rising. "The National Palace, tomorrow morning, and you have no idea why." "None whatsoever," she confirmed. "At first, I thought it was a mistake or a prank. Then I had more immediate concerns than a mysterious invitation. But now you're going," he finished for her, his tone making it a statement rather than a question. She nodded. "I requested a personal day weeks ago. Principal Walton wasn't thrilled, but the standardized testing doesn't begin until next week." "Want company?" Victor offered. "I have first period free tomorrow. I could at least drive you there, wait outside in case it's something." He trailed off, clearly trying to imagine what it might be. His offer touched her deeply. Throughout her difficult year, Ursula had grown accustomed to facing challenges alone. The simple gesture of solidarity, of not having to walk into uncertainty unaccompanied, felt like a gift. "I'd appreciate that," she said softly. That night Ursula slept poorly, her dreams chaotic fragments of marble corridors and faceless officials questioning her credentials. She woke before dawn, watching the sky lighten from black to indigo to the soft pink of sunrise. Her room, no longer just a temporary shelter, but a genuine home, felt like a sanctuary she had earned through perseverance. She dressed with particular care, selecting her best skirt suit, recently purchased to replace the worn one she'd made do with during her homeless months, styling her hair, applying makeup with attention to detail. Whatever awaited her at the National Palace, she would meet it with the dignity that had sustained her through her darkest days. Victor arrived precisely at 8:30, dressed more formally than she'd ever seen him for school, in a crisp button-down shirt and tie beneath his leather jacket. "You look nice," she commented as she slid into the passenger seat of his hybrid sedan. "Figured if we're going to the National Palace, I should look somewhat presentable," he replied with a grin. "Even if I'm just the chauffeur." The drive into the city took nearly an hour, the conversation flowing easily between them, despite Ursula's underlying nervousness. Victor had a gift for storytelling, entertaining her with tales from his college days in a touring orchestra, and his brief, disastrous attempt at being a wedding musician. The bride's grandmother insisted I played her favorite song, except what she was humming was the funeral march from Chopin's Piano Sonata No. 2. As they approached the imposing National Palace, with its neoclassical architecture and formal gardens, Ursula's anxiety intensified. Security checkpoints lined the entrance, guards in uniform checking identification, visitors forming orderly lines. "I don't even have proper documentation," she realized aloud. "Just the invitation." Victor squeezed her hand reassuringly. "If it was sent to you, they're expecting you. I'll wait here or in a coffee shop nearby. Text me when you know more." Gathering her courage, Ursula joined the shortest line, clutching her purse and the cream-colored invitation. As she neared the security desk, she mentally rehearsed explanations, apologies, the possibility of being turned away. "Good morning," the uniformed guard greeted her, expression professional but not unkind. "May I see your invitation and identification?" "I have the invitation," she explained, handing him the cream-colored card, "but I wasn't instructed to bring identification. I wasn't sure if this was legitimate, to be honest." The guard examined the invitation, then checked something on his computer screen. His expression shifted subtly. "Mrs. Ursula Matthews?" "Yes." "One moment, please." He picked up a phone, spoke briefly in lowered tones, then returned his attention to her. "Someone will escort you shortly. Please step to the side." Confused but somewhat relieved not to have been immediately dismissed, Ursula moved to the waiting area he indicated. Minutes later, a young woman in a tailored suit approached. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm Elena Ramirez, Executive Coordinator. Thank you for coming today. If you'll follow me." Still bewildered, Ursula followed Elena through security checkpoints and into the magnificent interior of the National Palace. Bapshiki. Floors gleamed beneath their feet. Ornate moldings adorned high ceilings, and historical paintings lined the corridors. They passed rooms where official-looking people conferred in hushed tones, where tour groups followed guides with reverent attention, where the business of governance continued in stately rhythm. Eleanor led her to an elevator requiring a keycard for access, then up to a floor where the decor grew even more impressive. Richer woods, more elaborate architectural details, security personnel stationed discreetly at intervals. "May I ask what this is about?" Ursula ventured, her curiosity finally overcoming her hesitation. Eleanor smiled enigmatically. "It will all be clear shortly. We're almost there." They stopped before massive double doors, where two security officers stood at attention. Elena spoke quietly to one, who nodded and opened the door for them. Inside was a large conference room dominated by a polished table surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city. At the far end of the room, several people were engaged in conversation, men and women in formal business attire, their manner suggesting importance, authority. Elena guided Ursula forward. "Sir, Mrs. Matthews has arrived." One of the men turned, tall, distinguished, with silver at his temples and a bearing that commanded attention without effort. Ursula recognized him immediately from news broadcasts and photographs, the Secretary of Education, whose policies she had both admired and criticized. From the remove of her classroom, "Mrs. Matthews," he said, crossing to her with hand extended. "Thank you for coming. I'm Richard Harrington." As if she wouldn't know who he was, as if this were an ordinary meeting between equals. "It's an honor, Mr. Secretary," she managed, shaking his hand. "Though I'm still not clear on why I'm here." He gestured toward the table. "Please, have a seat. There's someone who's been very eager to meet you." As Ursula moved toward the indicated chair, another person entered from a side door. A man in his early 30s, impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, with a presence that suggested both authority and approachability. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, though she was certain they had never met. "Mrs. Matthews," the secretary said, "may I present Weston Torres, our recently appointed Under-Secretary for Educational Innovation and the visionary behind the National Teaching Excellence Initiative." The name registered immediately. Weston Torres, educational reformer, philanthropist, rising political star, whose passion for transforming failing schools had made headlines. Ursula had read articles about his work, had even assigned one to her teacher education students during her brief time as an adjunct before Edward's illness. But why would he want to meet her? Weston Torres approached with a warm smile and extended hand. "Mrs. Matthews." Finally. There was something in his voice, something in his expression as their eyes met, a depth of emotion that seemed incongruous for a first meeting between strangers. "I'm afraid I don't understand," she said, accepting his handshake with growing confusion. Torres glanced at the others in the room. "Would you mind giving us a few minutes? This first part should be private." The secretary nodded, and the room quickly emptied until only Ursula and Weston Torres remained. He gestured toward the sitting area near the windows. more comfortable than the formal conference table. "Please," he said, "this might take a little explaining." Ursula sat, her confusion mounting by the second. Torres took the chair opposite her, leaning forward slightly, his expression intense, yet somehow vulnerable. "Mrs. Matthews, Ursula, do you remember teaching at Lincoln Middle School in Chicago? About 20 years ago?" The question startled her. "Yes, that was my first teaching position. I taught 7th grade English and social studies." "Room 213, he said quietly. "Second floor, end of the east hallway. You had inspirational quotes on colored paper all around the room, and a poster that said, 'Reading is dreaming with open eyes.'" Ursula stared at him, memory stirring. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I sat in the 3rd row, 4th seat from the left by the window." His voice had softened. "I was 10 years old. My mother worked nights cleaning offices. We lived in the storage room at the back of a bakery because it was all we could afford after my father left. I was angry all the time, hungry most days, ready to drop out as soon as I legally could." The room seemed to tilt beneath Ursula. Memories long buried began to surface. A thin, solemn boy with watchful eyes, always the first to arrive, last to leave. The child who'd devoured books she'd lent him, returning them with careful notes in the margins. "Wesley," she whispered. "Wesley Torres." He smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright. "That's what I went by then. I started using my full name, Weston, in college." "You were so bright," she continued, remembering more with each passing moment. "You wrote that essay about changing education policy that won the citywide competition." "You entered me in that contest," he reminded her. "I told you it was stupid, that no one would care what some poor kid thought. You made me do it anyway." "Because it was brilliant. Because you were brilliant." The pieces were falling into place now, this successful man before her, and the angry child he had once been. "But why am I here? After all these years?" Weston leaned forward, his expression intense. "When I was 10, I lived in the back of a bakery. My mother worked nights. I was angry, hungry, and ashamed. I nearly left school. But one teacher, gave me books, stayed after hours, told me I had value, that I could lead. She saved me." The words resonated in Ursula's mind, familiar somehow, though she couldn't place why. "That teacher was you, Mrs. Matthews," he continued. "You didn't just teach me the alphabet. You taught me I could be someone." Understanding dawned slowly, fragmenting her composure. "The letter, the invitation, this was all you?" He nodded. "I've been looking for you for years, lost track after you moved from Chicago. Then 3 months ago, one of my staff found an article about teacher homelessness in educational publications. There was a small mention of a protest at a school, board meeting in your district. Students standing up for a teacher who'd been let go. Your name was there." His gaze held hers steadily. "I sent the invitation then, not knowing if you'd come, not even sure if it would reach you, but I had to try." "But why?" Ursula asked, genuinely bewildered. "Why go to such lengths?" "Because I owe you everything," he said simply. "After you encouraged me to enter that essay contest, things changed. The prize included a scholarship to a prep school. That led to university, then law school, then education policy work." He gestured around them at the opulent surroundings. "None of this would have happened without you. But when I found that article, when I realized what you'd been through, I knew I had to do more than just say thank you." The doors opened, and the Secretary of Education returned with several others, including camera operators and what appeared to be journalists. "Are we ready?" the Secretary asked. Weston glanced at Ursula questioningly. She straightened her shoulders, still processing the extraordinary revelation, but unwilling to show her confusion to these strangers. "We're ready," Weston confirmed, standing and gesturing for Ursula to join him. What followed seemed almost dreamlike in its unreality. Cameras flashed. The Secretary spoke eloquently about the impact of dedicated teachers. Weston delivered a speech that moved several audience members to tears as he recounted his journey from impoverished student to educational reformer, all catalyzed, he emphasized repeatedly, by one teacher who had seen his potential when no one else had. "Today," Weston announced, "we're launching the Matthews Initiative, a comprehensive program to ensure no educator ever faces homelessness or financial insecurity while dedicating their lives to our children's futures. He outlined a multi-million-dollar effort that would provide housing assistance, emergency funds, and advocacy for teachers in financial crisis. The program would begin in Ursula's district, but expand nationally within 3 years. And leading this initiative, he continued, turning toward her, will be the woman who inspired it. Mrs. Ursula Matthews will serve as our executive director if she accepts the position. Cameras swiveled toward her. Ursula felt the weight of every gaze, every expectation, every possibility the offer represented. This position comes with resources appropriate to its importance, Weston added, including housing, comprehensive benefits and a salary commensurate with the vital work involved. The secretary stepped forward, handing her an official-looking document, a certificate of appointment, and a small box containing a medal representing the National Excellence in Education Award. "No teacher should ever live in a car," he said, his words carrying to every corner of the suddenly hushed room. Tears welled in Ursula's eyes, spilling down her cheeks unchecked. All the months of fear, of shame, of hiding, and now this moment of public recognition, of validation, not just of her teaching, but of her struggle, of her perseverance. As applause filled the room, Ursula found her voice at last. "I accept," she said, the words barely audible through her emotion. "Not for myself, but for every educator sleeping in their car tonight, for every teacher choosing between dinner and classroom supplies, for every child whose potential might be overlooked if their teachers are too exhausted from working second. Jobs to see it." She looked directly at Weston, no longer the angry boy from her classroom, but the man who had channeled that anger into purpose, into change. 20 years ago, I told a brilliant young student that his voice mattered, that his ideas could change the world. I had no idea I was right. Their mutual understanding needed no further words. A circle completed, a relationship transformed but unbroken by time or circumstance. In that moment, surrounded by cameras and dignitaries and the trappings of official power, Ursula felt something shift within her, not just relief at her own changed fortunes, but a profound sense that her journey had meaning beyond herself, that her darkest days had led somehow to this moment of possibility for others who would follow. What surprising twist was hinted at earlier? Will Ursula choose to leave classroom teaching for her new role? How will her relationships with Victor, her students and her community evolve with this dramatic change? Chapter 11. Ursula sat in stunned silence as Victor navigated through the midday traffic, her mind still processing the morning's events. The weight of the medal in her purse, the official folder containing her appointment, tangible evidence that what had happened was real, not some elaborate dream born of desperation. "So, let me get this straight," Victor said, glancing at her, with an expression balanced between awe and amusement. "One of your former students is now basically the second most powerful person in American education, has been searching for you for years, and just offered you a job running a multi-million-dollar initiative." "That about covers it," she confirmed, her voice still slightly unsteady. "I keep thinking I'll wake up in my car, freezing, with none of this having happened." Victor reached across to squeeze her hand briefly, before returning his attention to the road. "It happened. I saw the press conference from the lobby. Half the people there were crying by the end, including some very expensive suits who don't look like they cry easily." The press conference had lasted nearly an hour. Questions about the Matthews Initiative, about her background, about her plans for addressing teacher housing insecurity nationwide. She'd answered as honestly as she could, drawing on her own recent experience, while trying to maintain the professional composure expected in such a setting. Afterward, Weston had escorted her to a private office where they'd spoken for another hour about logistics, expectations, and her transition timeline. The position would begin officially in June, after the school year ended, though preliminary, work would start immediately. "There's an apartment that comes with the position," she told Victor now, "in the city, close to the initiative headquarters. They showed me photos. It's beautiful." The word seemed inadequate for the spacious, light-filled rooms that had been presented to her on a tablet, so different from her tiny rented room or the back seat of her car. "When would you move?" Victor asked, his tone carefully neutral. "They suggested as soon as possible, but I told them I needed to finish the school year with my students, especially with standardized testing coming up." She paused, studying his profile. "I promised those children I wouldn't leave them again." "And after the school year?" The question hung between them, carrying implications beyond the professional change she faced. Their relationship had been developing slowly, cautiously, coffee after tutoring sessions, occasional dinners, conversations that extended beyond work to dreams and disappointments, to favorite books and films, to the quiet moments of connection that build a foundation for something more. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything's happening so fast. This morning I was a teacher worried about test prep. Now I'm supposedly going to run a national initiative that doesn't even exist yet." Victor nodded thoughtfully. "It's a lot to process, but if anyone can handle it, you can." He smiled at her. "You survived living in your car while maintaining teaching standards that had students staging protests when you left. This should be easy by comparison." His confidence in her was touching, though she was less certain herself. The scope of the opportunity was both exhilarating and intimidating. A chance to create systemic change, to transform individual suffering into collective action. Yet it would mean leaving the classroom, stepping away from the direct impact, her daily teaching into the more abstract realm of policy and administration. "I'll need to tell Principal Walton," she realized aloud, "and the students." "Walton might spontaneously combust," Victor predicted with a hint of mischief. "First the board forces him to rehire you, then you become a national figure running a program named after you. It's like a revenge fantasy come to life." Ursula laughed despite her lingering shock. It wasn't his fault, not really. He was just following district directives about budget cuts, with zero compassion or creativity, Victor pointed out. "A better administrator would have found a way to keep you." They arrived back at Westbridge Elementary just after lunch period. The school day continued in its normal rhythm, oblivious to the transformation Ursula had undergone that morning. She checked in with the office, where the secretary handed her a stack of messages and mentioned that her substitute had left detailed notes about the morning's activities. Walking down the familiar hallway toward her classroom felt surreal, as if she were simultaneously the person she had always been and someone entirely new. Students passing by greeted her normally. Colleagues nodded or waved without any indication that they sensed the change in her circumstances. In her classroom, her fifth graders were engaged in silent reading, supervised by the substitute teacher who looked relieved to see her return. "Welcome back, Mrs. Matthews," the young woman said. "We've had a productive morning. They're excellent students." "Yes, they are," Ursula agreed, surveying the familiar faces now looking up from their books with curiosity. "Thank you for covering my class." After the substitute departed, Ursula moved to the front of the room, trying to decide how much to share with these children who had stood for her when she needed it most. They deserved honesty, but she was still processing the morning's events herself. "Did you have a good appointment, Mrs. Matthews?" Tasha asked, always perceptive. "I did," Ursula replied simply. "It was unexpected in many ways. I'll tell you more about it soon, but for now, I'd like to hear about what you accomplished this morning." The remainder of the day passed in its usual structured routine: math lessons, science explorations, the organized chaos of dismissal. Ursula moved through it all with outward calm that belied her inner turmoil, the weight of decisions pressing upon her. After the final bell, she sat at her desk, composing an email to Principal Walton requesting a meeting the following morning. Simple professional words that gave no hint of the extraordinary circumstances behind them. A knock at her classroom door interrupted her thoughts. Victor stood there, orchestra folder under his arm, his expression concerned. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been very quiet since we got back." Ursula sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I'm trying to wrap my mind around what this all means. For my career, for my students, for—" She hesitated. "For us." He entered the room fully, closing the door behind him. "What do you want it to mean?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. What did she want? after months of focusing solely on survival, then on rebuilding. The luxury of considering. Her own desires felt almost foreign. "I want to make a difference," she said finally. "I always have. But I've only ever known how to do that in a classroom, one student at a time. This initiative, it's a chance to help teachers on a scale I never imagined possible." "But," Victor prompted gently, sensing her hesitation, "but it means leaving teaching, becoming an administrator, a public figure. I'm not sure that's who I am." She gestured around the classroom with its colorful learning displays and carefully arranged reading nook. "This feels like home, like purpose." Victor pulled a student chair alongside her desk, sitting to bring them eye to eye. "You don't have to decide everything today. And maybe it's not an either-or situation. The best administrators I've known kept one foot in the classroom, even if it was just guest teaching occasionally." His practical perspective helped ground her swirling thoughts. "You're right. I need to talk to Weston, to Mr. Torres, about that possibility, about creating a role that lets me remain connected to actual teaching while developing the initiative. And as for us," Victor continued, his voice softening, "distance doesn't have to be an ending. The city's not that far. Weekends exist, summer breaks." The tentative future he sketched, one that included both her new opportunity and their developing relationship, offered a vision she hadn't allowed herself to consider in the whirlwind of the day's events. "I'd like that," she said simply. The meeting with Principal Walton the next morning was as awkward as she'd anticipated. She explained the basics of the Matthews Initiative and her appointment as its director, watching his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to a carefully composed neutrality. "This is unexpected," he said when she had finished, "though certainly an impressive opportunity. When would you be leaving us?" "I've requested to complete the school year," she explained. "My official start date with the initiative would be June 15th, after the student's last day." He nodded, already seeming to calculate the administrative implications. "We'll need to begin searching for your replacement immediately. With your permission, I'd like to announce this to the faculty at tomorrow's staff meeting." By lunchtime, despite the supposed confidentiality of their conversation, whispers had begun circulating through the school. By afternoon, several teachers had stopped by her classroom with questions, congratulations, barely disguised curiosity. The official press release from the Department of Education went public that evening, and by the following morning, Ursula's phone was flooded with messages from former colleagues in Chicago, from teacher friends across the country, from journalists seeking interviews, from the parents of her current and former students. The story had struck a nerve. The teacher who had endured homelessness while continuing to educate children, now positioned to help others in similar circumstances. Several news outlets framed it as a redemption narrative. Others focused on the systemic failures that had allowed her situation to occur in the first place. Through it all, Ursula maintained her focus on her students, insisting to reporters that interviews would have to wait until after school hours, declining television appearances that would take her away from the classroom. Her priority remained unchanged, preparing these children for their futures, giving them the tools and confidence to navigate an increasingly complex world. One afternoon in late April, she found Jaden lingering after dismissal, obviously wanting to speak but uncertain how to begin. "What's on your mind?" she prompted gently. "Are you really leaving to help other teachers?" he asked, his expression serious. "My mum says you're going to be famous." Ursula smiled, shaking her head. "I'm going to be doing important work, but I doubt fame will be involved. And yes, I'll be helping teachers who are struggling financially, making sure they have homes and the support they need." "Because you didn't have those things," he stated with the straightforward clarity of children, "when you were living in your car." The direct reference to her former circumstances still had the power to make her flinch, though she was growing more accustomed to acknowledging that period openly. "That's right. Sometimes difficult experiences give us insight into how to help others facing similar challenges." Jaden considered this thoughtfully. "Like how you understand when I can't finish homework because I'm watching my little brother." "Exactly like that," she confirmed. "Empathy comes from understanding what others are going through because you've been there yourself." He nodded, satisfied with her answer. I think you'll be really good at your new job. But I'll miss you. Next year. I'll miss you too, she said, meaning it deeply. But I promise to come back and visit. And maybe your class could write to me about what you're learning and I could write back. The suggestion brightened his expression. Like pen pals? That would be cool. As April turned to May, Ursula balanced her classroom responsibilities with increasing preparations for her new role. Evenings were filled with video conferences, document reviews, recruitment discussions for the initiative team. Weston had been as good as his word, providing resources and support while respecting her insistence on completing her teaching commitment. "You're setting the tone for the entire initiative," he told her during one late-night call, demonstrating that we value teachers' commitments to their students above all else. It's exactly the message we want to send. The apartment in the city was being prepared for her arrival in June. Marlene had expressed both pride in Ursula's opportunity and sadness at losing her as a tenant and friend, though they had promised to stay in touch. Victor had been unwavering in his support, helping her prepare for media appearances, listening as she processed her anxieties about the transition, offering perspective without pressure. Their relationship continued to deepen, despite the looming geographical separation, built on mutual respect and genuine connection that neither took for granted. As May progressed and standardized testing concluded, with impressive results that vindicated Ursula's teaching methods, the reality of her impending departure became increasingly tangible. She began packing her personal teaching materials, sorting through years of accumulated resources, deciding what to take to her new position, what to leave for her replacement, what to share with colleagues. In quiet moments alone in her classroom, Ursula sometimes wondered at the extraordinary path that had led her here. From desperate nights in her car to leading a national initiative, from invisibility to influence. The journey had transformed her in ways she was still discovering, strengthening her resolve to ensure that no other educator would have to endure what she had experienced. The mysterious invitation that had once seemed like a cruel joke or an inexplicable anomaly now represented a turning point, a moment when past and future had converged to create possibilities she could never have imagined from the confines of her car on those cold winter nights. Spring light filtered through the classroom windows as Ursula tapped the final note into her laptop. The bell had rung 10 minutes earlier, yet no one stirred. Instead of scrambling for coats or lunchboxes, her students lingered in their seats, absorbed in the gentle hum of pen on paper. Today they were drafting letters for their new Pen Pal program with the Matthews Initiative headquarters, a project Ursula had designed to keep them connected to her even after June. She smiled at the neat rows of cursive, Jaden's paragraphs, brimmed with pride as he described his Thanksgiving basket. Tasha's letter wove a bold poem into her introduction. Devon meticulously listed his favorite new books. Each word reminded Ursula why she had fought so hard to stay at Westbridge until the very last day. When her gaze drifted to the empty seat at the back, she felt the familiar tug of anticipation. In just a few hours, she would lock this door, for the final time, and carry her boxes across campus to the car waiting by the curb, Victor's old sedan, newly polished and packed with teaching aids she planned to donate. Driving away, she would leave behind this room of repaired desks and dog-eared maps, but she carried within her every lesson learned here. The classroom door opened quietly. Victor slipped inside holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He set one on her desk beyond the reach of curious hands. "Digital detox," he teased softly. "I thought you might need this." "Thank you," she whispered, lifting the cup to inhale the rich aroma. Her hands trembled with gratitude and something else, a bittersweet ache. "I heard you spoke to the board this morning?" He nodded, stepping closer to peer over her shoulder at the letters. "I told them what these kids mean to you. They're thrilled by the Pen Pal idea. They even set aside funds to include art supplies so your students can send drawings alongside their letters." Tears welled in Ursula's eyes. "They did that for me?" "For you. For all the teachers who will follow in your footsteps." They stood together in comfortable silence until Devon flicked a pencil across the room, scattering classmates' attention toward the door. In unison, the children greeted Victor. He waved shyly, then bowed theatrically, earning a ripple of giggles. Ursula chuckled, smoothing her skirt. "Mr. Reyes," she called, "thank you for visiting my class one last time." He hurried forward, cheeks flushed. "I wouldn't miss it. I brought guitars today, if we have a spare minute." Ursula surveyed the clock. 15 minutes until the final bell. "Let's do it." The room hummed to life as Victor unpacked his guitar, its wooden body gleaming in the sunlight. He played a gentle melody, and soon 27 young voices joined him, singing "Lean on Me." Ursula watched the faces she had come to know so well, bright, imperfect, hopeful. When they reached the chorus, Jaden's clear tenor soared above the rest, and Ursula felt the note as if it were a benediction upon her career here. "Thank you," she said when the song ended. "That was beautiful." They applauded, then filed out slowly, hugging her, dropping handmade cards and tokens into her arms, a beaded bracelet from Tasha, a polished riverstone from Miguel, an origami crane from Elise. Each gift was a message, and she accepted them as precious cargo. When the classroom emptied, Victor helped her stack her paraphernalia into boxes: grammar charts, science fair ribbons, a battered copy of the Chronicles of Narnia she had earmarked for gifted readers. Finally, the room stood bare, its walls echoing memories. "Ready?" Victor asked, key in hand. Ursula inhaled, the familiar scent of chalk dust and paper fading. "Ready." They carried the boxes to the hallway in a solemn procession, like dignitaries accompanying a retiring monarch. Teachers peered from doorways to offer quiet congratulations. Custodians paused to shake her hand. Even Principal Walton stood at the end of the corridor, expression guarded but eyes soft. "Mrs. Matthews," he said as they passed, voice low. "Your work here. It meant more than I realized. I'm sorry for the way things unfolded." Ursula paused, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for saying that." She inclined her head and continued on. Outside, the morning air carried the warmth of early summer. Dandelions tufted the front lawn of Westbridge Elementary, and a single paper chain, the one that had counted down her final days, fluttered from a nearby window. Victor loaded the last box into the trunk. Ursula approached the passenger door. When she turned, she found Weston Torres standing by the curb. His suit was crisp beneath the sunlight. His smile was both excited and respectful. "Weston," Ursula greeted him, stunned by the timing. She hadn't expected him to attend the final day. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world," he said. "These students, this school, it's why the Matthews Initiative exists. I wanted to see it with my own eyes." Ursula felt tears prick her lids. "Thank you for coming." Weston gestured toward the car. "Before you drive away, may I offer one more thank you?" He handed her a small, wrapped gift. Inside was a pocket-sized notebook bound in soft leather, stamped with her name and the Matthews Initiative logo. "For your new office," he explained. "To record ideas as they come, to remind you that every great program starts with a single note." She touched the notebook reverently. "I love it." He glanced at Victor, then smiled. "I hope I'm not intruding." Victor shook his head with an easy grin. "You're never intruding." The three of them stood on the sidewalk, a gentle convergence of past, present, and future. Then Ursula slid into the car, clutching the notebook to her heart. Victor closed the door, and Weston raised a hand in farewell. "See you soon," Ursula called, "at headquarters." She glanced at her old classroom one last time before Victor slid behind the wheel. As they pulled away, the building receded, but the echo of student laughter seemed to linger in the air. The Matthews Initiative offices, housed in a renovated historic building downtown, smelled of fresh paint and promise. On her first day, Ursula unlocked the door to her new office, placed the leather notebook upon her desk, and surveyed the view, a bustling cityscape alive with potential. Her team, policy analysts, social workers, public affairs specialists, filed in to greet her. Each handshake, each welcome, felt like the opening of a new chapter. She spent the morning mapping out immediate priorities, creating an emergency housing fund, establishing partnerships with faith-based organizations for transitional shelters, drafting legislation proposals to incentivize school districts to include teacher housing in their budgets. By midday, her desk was strewn with color-coded folders and coffee cups. At lunchtime, Weston appeared with sandwiches clipped together in a brown paper bag. "Thought you might need refueling," he said. She laughed. "I've forgotten how to eat while working." They walked in the sunlit atrium, discussing grant applications and board meeting schedules. For the first time in months, Ursula felt the exhilaration of tackling systemic change rather than singular survival. And yet, a soft piece of her remained tied to those quiet mornings grading papers in a suffocating car or huddling under blankets to stay warm. "I've arranged for the pen pal letters to arrive here," Weston said as they passed a row of mail slots. "The kids have already sent 50. I want to display them in the hallway, remind everyone why we do this." Ursula's chest warmed. "That means more than you know." Summer arrived in full bloom while Ursula managed both her initiative duties and the end-of-year reports for her tutoring sessions. Victor dropped by occasionally, balancing his music recitals with her grueling schedule. They savored stolen dinners, sharing laughter over mismatched china plates in her apartment, the one provided by the initiative with its skyline view and spacious living room. In late June, the first cohort of teachers moved into the pilot housing complex funded by her emergency program. Ursula attended the ribbon cutting alongside district superintendents, media crews, and several of her former Westbridge students now grown and pursuing education degrees. When the ribbon fell, revealing the brightly painted foyer, Ursula felt a surge of triumph she had never known in the silent corridors of her old car. Later, at an afternoon reception, one young teacher approached her with tears in her eyes. "I had nowhere to live after school funding cuts. You saved me." Ursula grasped her hands. No one should teach from a car, ever again. Paki. Autumn, the Matthews Initiative, had expanded into 3 additional districts. Ursula traveled across the state to convene teacher town halls, gathering stories that would shape new policy proposals. Each time she listened to accounts of late rent, second-shift jobs, and the heartbreak of leaving classrooms bare, she remembered the cold nights in her Oldsmobile and the salvific kindness of Gloria and Marlene. Those memories fueled her drive. Videos of her keynote speeches circulated online, spotlighting the crisis of teacher homelessness and garnering support from national educators' unions. Fundraising campaigns met their targets swiftly, enabling Ursula to launch a mentorship arm pairing seasoned teachers with newcomers at risk of financial precarity. Through it all, she kept her leather notebook close, sketching floor plans, jotting legislative language, scribbling students' poems. Each page was a testament to her journey from invisible 5th-grade teacher to national changemaker. One brisk November morning, Ursula returned to Westbridge Elementary at the invitation of Principal Walton, now her ally in promoting teacher well-being. He showed her a new wing of the school, a small teacher resource center equipped with a private rest area, showers, and an emergency supply of classroom materials. A bronze plaque above the door read, "The Matthews Resource Suite." Children clustered around as Ursula cut the ribbon alongside several staff members. Jaden, now in 8th grade, beamed proudly. Tasha, in the chorus club, performed a song she'd written about gratitude. Devon, studying to be a chef, served homemade cookies. When the applause died down, Walton placed a hand on Ursula's shoulder. "Thank you for restoring faith in the value of our teachers." She looked out at the smiling faces, students, colleagues, strangers, transformed into friends. "I only did what someone once did for me." As the crowd dispersed, Victor stepped forward, holding her hand. "You did more than that." Ursula smiled, her gaze drifting to the teacher's lounge beyond the ribbon. For years, she had known the loneliness of that space. Now it brimmed with warmth and safety for her peers. "I'd like to invite the entire school board to meet in the new suite," she said. "I think they need to see how far compassion can take us." Winter settled gently over the city, dusting rooftops with snow. Ursula sat at her desk late one evening, reviewing the year's accomplishments. 5 districts enrolled, 200 teachers housed, $15,000 disbursed in emergency grants. But when she closed her eyes, she still felt the shiver of those first nights on the parking lot pavement. A soft knock at her office door announced Weston. He entered with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "For the director," he teased. She accepted the mug gratefully. "Thank you. How did you know I needed a break?" "I've learned your patterns," he replied, settling across from her. "And I have something else for you." He drew from his coat pocket a cream-colored envelope, the very same kind that had summoned her to the National Palace 8 months earlier. "We found this in the archives of the Department of Education. It was misfiled." Ursula's gaze locked onto the envelope, heart pounding. She opened it with trembling fingers to reveal a typed note. "You are the catalyst. Your story proves that one person can ignite a movement. Keep shining." No signature, no date. She looked up, eyes brimming. "It's from him, isn't it?" "From Weston." He nodded, eyes shining with affection. "He wanted you to have it permanently, to remind you that the invitation never ended. It was just the beginning." She folded the note and placed it gently in her notebook. "Thank you." They sat together in silence, savoring the warmth of cocoa, the hush of snowfall outside, and the comfort of companionship that had grown alongside the initiative. For Ursula, it was the final piece of a journey, a reminder that her worth had never depended on where she slept, but on the lives she touched and the light she carried. When the last snowflake drifted past the window, Ursula closed her eyes and whispered a grateful prayer, knowing that no matter what came next, she had found her home. Not in a building, but in purpose, in community, in the unbreakable bond between teacher and student, friend and mentor, survivor and advocate. And as the world outside glittered with winter's hush, she felt the promise of spring stirring within her soul, ready for whatever new chapters awaited.